Please.
Mr. Featherling?
Here.
Mr. Miller?
Here.
Mr. Washington?
He's here.
Mr. Tholen? Ms. Polk? Mr. Payton?
Yeah.
Ms. Peters?
Present.
Ms. Dunbar?
Present.
Mr. Kinzinger?
Present.
Mr. Fairfield?
Present.
Mr. Smith? Mr. Swanson? Mr. Dennell? Mr. Long? Mr. Wheeler?
Want a chair?
Mr. Seroy?
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. First up, we'll do public comment. I don't think we have any. Is there anyone here for public comment? I don't have any sheets, so we'll move on to that. Everyone received the minutes by email or by paper. Does anyone make a motion to approve the minutes or anything? And Mr. Payton? Second by, oh man. Yeah, I want to call you Chad, but that's not right. Mr. Miller is different than Chad. Okay, there you go. Hi, Chad. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Motion carries. Thank you. Okay, first up, we have the building report from Delbert here.
Okay, building report for December 2019, which you have a copy.
I got it.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, the building report for December 2019, you should have a copy in your packet. We issued a total of 43 permits. 2 of those were for new houses and collected total fees of $21,242. It's a little bit down from last year for the same month, which we collected $32,836 in fees.
Okay, anyone have any questions for Delbert on that? Okay. So, Delbert's going to ask us about our stormwater MS4 program discussion again.
As usual, and I also have a little news on that too. As usual, we have we ask every month as to whether any of you have any stormwater issues in your districts or that you're aware of that you'd like to bring to our attention.
Okay.
Also, Keith Mosier of my office is now a certified stormwater inspector, so
Okay,
he just got his certification about 3 weeks ago.
Okay, we get a motion to accept the building report. A motion in a second. Back there, Ms. Dunbar, Ms. Peters. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Motion carries. Okay. Next part will be the aerial photography vendor selection. This needs a roll call, so you have to open the bids.
It was a request for qualifications, not a request for
Okay,
bids.
so it's qualifications and not.
Right,
Okay.
so that was
Don't need a vote.
that was all reviewed at the GIS committee, which is appointed by this board as well as our municipal partners. We had 7 vendors that gave their qualifications and their prices. The committee, and we also offered, we asked for prices on 4 different options. One was 6-inch pixels, which we currently have for our aerial photography. Another one was for 3-inch pixels. There was a combination where we would do 3-inch pixels in the metro area and 6-inch pixels outside the county. And then there was 2 options that had oblique imagery, which is basically 3D imagery. The committee determined that the 3D imagery was out of our price range at this time, and then maybe we would look at it again when we redo aerial photography in 5 years. They settled on Surdex at a price tag of $140,000. So what we're asking for today is for the committee to approve that recommendation and send it on to the full county board, and to allow the county board chairman to enter into the contract. You have a copy of the contract in your packet. We have pending SAO, our state's attorney's approval on the contract. We've got that up at their office right now for review.
Okay. Any questions about it? Yes, Mr. Washington was first. Mr. Washington makes a motion to
I'd like to add,
approve.
excuse me, Dell, isn't this considerably lower than what we've had in the past?
Yes, it has gotten, because of digital technology, it has gotten a lot cheaper and delivered a lot faster. In 2015, it took about 9 months from the time of the flight till we actually got final delivery. They're telling us now that they will fly it as soon as they can in either March or April. They have to wait till the snow's off the ground and before leaves. So there's a window there up here on the trees, but we will probably have our delivery in July or August.
Okay, we had a first by Mr. Washington, second by Mr. Searay.
No, Mr.
Oh,
Kinzinger.
Mr. Kinzinger?
I got a question.
Yes, question, Mr. Searay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Del, were any of these companies the ones that did the 2015
Surdex.
Surdex did? Okay,
Yes,
so
we already have a relationship with
Right.
them. I don't know how much that weighed into the committee's decision, but they were the lowest bidder for option one, which is the 3-inch pixels. At 3 inches, you can actually zoom into a manhole cover and see exactly what it is.
you can
It's
see what it says.
pretty
on it.
nice.
Can you
It's
read the
not just a
writing
little-
on the top?
It's not a little blurry blob on the roadway
All right,
anymore. It's
great,
very
thank you.
nice. It'll also allow us to get much better topography later on. We're at 2-foot contours. With this photography, we can probably get down to 1-foot contours or maybe even sub-foot.
Okay, Mr. Kinzinger.
Just a question to refresh my mind. This dollar amount is consistent with the budget or less than the budget, and there's money for this in
Yes,
the
well,
budget?
yeah, the GIS, the entire department and all of our purchases are paid for through user fees paid at the recorder's office.
And is the
That goes
dollar,
into a special account. There's $780,000 in that account last I checked. And that's what this money's being saved for, is this topography, planometrics, and some other larger purchase items besides our yearly budget. Back when the 2020 budget was established, I asked for $240,000 because we had no idea what the price would be. So there's $240,000 in the budget to pay for aerial photography.
thank you.
Okay, Mr. Wheeler?
Thank you. I'm just curious on the decision, not saying it's the wrong one, but the oblique imagery, the 3D, which is really good for fire and law enforcement. Was there, and I just look over at option 4 for the Williams Company. I'm just, there's not much difference there, but you get a lot more with oblique, and I'm trying to figure out, was there any input from those groups? Or?
I didn't put all the caveats into this. These are just the raw numbers. That 168 was just for them to collect the photography,
Okay.
not to process it. So they were just going to fly the planes and collect the photography for us. The obliques needs a lot of post-processing after the fact, and that's where you're getting into those $200,000-$400,000.
So that's
price
all in
tags.
cost is the 140. The other ones are the base cost plus
Yes.
these other things that are
Yes.
substantially more.
All, yeah, they all did not bid equally, I guess would be the best way to say, even though our RFQ spelled it out. They chose to only bid for the capture of the photography in that regard,
Okay.
which would still leave us with a price tag of well over $100,000 to add to that to get that post-processing done. It was felt that the benefit, it was a cost benefit, and it just wasn't there right now.
Okay, thanks. Ms. Dunbar, you still have your question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wondered if there were any local firms that even do this, let alone bid.
Not that I'm
I didn't
aware
think so.
of.
Okay, thanks.
It's a pretty tight
I
group.
figured. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a pretty specialized group.
Ms. Peters, what did you have to say?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Were you able to look at sample of things that they had done in those different images?
Yes.
Okay. And-
Each company was interviewed. They had a 45-minute time slot with where they had PowerPoints with all of their samples, and there's actually a bid packet from each one of them that has printed copies of that too.
Thank you. I'm sure that went into the decision making, the
Yes, I
quality.
mean, we spent a week interviewing
Okay.
these firms, so.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on the floor. We need a roll call for this. Oh, wait a second. I thought Mr. Kinzinger seconded it.
Mr. Featherling?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Washington?
Yes.
Mr. Payton?
Yes.
Ms. Peters? Ms. Dunbar? Mr. Kinzinger? Mr. Fairfield? Mr. Smith? Mr. Long? Mr. Wheeler? Motion carries.
Thank you. Okay, in the planning section to this, decommissioning plan focus group, is that something we're gonna have discussion about, or we're gonna have any kind of motions or anything on that, Delbert?
There may be a motion, that's possible.
Okay, you wanna go ahead first then? Okay,
At the last meeting, I presented, I believe it was one decommissioning plan at that time for a solar farm. We now have two, and copies of those are in your packet. And there was a discussion about creating a focus group of 3 county board members from this committee to discuss how we would handle these. And that group has not been formed yet. So I put this down as a focus group, but I'm not, personally not sure we even need to go that route. And I'll explain a little bit why. On the screen is what our actual ordinance says about decommissioning plans for solar farms. I know you can't read it. It's people who write code and ordinances just love to ramble on. But basically, it says that they must provide a decommissioning plan that explains how they're going to disassemble this facility when it's no longer viable, and have dollar amounts for the removal of all of the improvements to take it back to the land, back to the way it was before, be it a farm field or just an open field. So they need to provide some type of financial guarantee that matches that number in that plan. And that plan is reviewed every 3 years. So you're really not looking at a decommissioning plan at this point for 20 years. You're looking at it for the next 3. Which the likelihood of them being decommissioned in the next 3 years is probably slim or none.
Yeah.
Because it will be reevaluated in 3 years, and the security will be adjusted accordingly. That being said, there are really, I broke it down, there are 3 questions that need to be considered. 1, are the decommissioning cost numbers in these 2 plans reasonable and accurate? Myself and my staff have reviewed it, and we feel that it is reasonable. Okay, and we can't predict the future, but if you look at the numbers that they give there for removing the roads, removing the fence, reseeding the site, it seems reasonable. So if you accept those numbers, then the next question is, because a lot of them would like to remove the value of scrap from their financial security. Second question is, do you want to do that, or do you want a financial security for the entire amount of the decommissioning plan? Scrap is a very volatile commodity, and those numbers go up and down all the time. And thirdly, once you've answered those 2 questions, what type of financial security would be accepted? What does the county want to see? Our ordinance says that a letter of credit or no, not a letter.
It's a bond, right? It's a bond.
Letter of credit or cash placed in a county escrow account, or the board can specify a different form of security at their own discretion. So my recommendation is that we do accept these costs as they have outlined in the plan, because they do seem reasonable to us. I also recommend we do not include a reduction for the value of scrap.
Right.
Okay, that definitely covers the county. And that we accept either a bond or cash in an escrow account for the amount of the decommissioning plan. We'll revisit again in 3 years. I should probably also note that there's another guarantee out there through the Illinois Department of Agriculture, because shortly after these started popping up, they passed new legislation that required them to do what they call an agricultural impact mitigation plan, which is very similar to a decommissioning plan. So there will be security at the state level to have these decommissioned as well. Now that is a little bit different plan as far as the security. The first 6 years, they only have to give 10% of the value. At year 11, they're at 100% of the value. And it gets re-evaluated periodically too, not nearly as often as ours does. I think it's every 5 years. So there's 2 levels of protection on this to have these removed. And the purpose of the decommissioning plan is to protect the county and the public's interests, so that county taxpayers do not have to pay to have these removed.
Okay. Let's see, number 10 here, we got Mr. Andy, or
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When I've been talking to Dell about this, and when we said get those questions in front of the group, to me it was obvious on a couple of them. First of all, bonds or cash in an escrow account. That's the only way you can do this. You can't have a corporate surety guarantee, because what if they're sold off, or sometimes it doesn't. What if they go completely belly up and then we're left holding the bag? So I'd highly recommend with a bond or cash in an escrow account. I couldn't vote for anything else but that. The first item, the numbers do seem accurate and reasonable. I believe you looked around and tried to look for comps on that, and there's nothing indicating that those are out of whack in this area.
It does not seem to be, no.
Yeah.
The one volatile part that I think we were all concerned with last time was the value of scrap. when we were talking about this, because it shouldn't be up to us to be able to determine what the scrap market's gonna be. It's their investment, it should be on them, so I would say yes, that we should, it should be included in the financial security, and then if they end up getting a better deal or a worse deal, that's on them.
Just
So
as
that's the way I feel about it, now let the committee.
as an example, one of them, the total cost of decommissioning the site is $223,000, but if you take scrap value out of the equation, it's actually only $98,000.
I think you should guarantee the whole thing is my point. And
That's
then
my
if they can
opinion
get
as well.
full value of the scrap or it goes up, it's on them. If it goes down, it's on them. It's their investment, not ours.
Oh, excuse, real quick, Andy. Do we, Delbert, when this happens, do we put that with the land or do you put that with the equipment? Because if the impression I got from these solar farm guys is they run around the country and set these up and get them going, and then sometimes they sell them off and they move. So does it go with the owner, original owner of the property, or does it stay with the land itself?
Stays with the land, it must transfer with the owner.
It would, so it would transfer with the deed?
Yes. The project transfers, the decommissioning plan transfers,
Okay, Mr. Kinzinger.
and they would have to.
As one who obtains bonds, the bond would be issued to the benefit of Kankakee County. And I would like to see a couple of things done regarding this decommissioning plan. First of all, the bond, I think, should be at 125% of the difference between what the ag ordinance says and what the county says, so there, we don't have to have bonding duplication. Secondly, the onus of renewing that bond is on the solar farm or whoever, with $1,000 a day penalty if it's not renewed properly, and that the proceeds, Kankakee County has to be named as the benefit of that bond.
Beneficiary?
Yeah,
So,
Neither of those items are in our ordinance.
I know, that's,
Yeah.
it needs to be in there. I've been involved in bonds that have expired
Yep.
with counties.
letter of credits
Yeah,
expired too.
Didn't even realize they'd expired, and then I said, well, thanks, guys, and walked away.
Yeah,
But I mean, you can't do that.
yeah. Well, I think that forming of the committee was kind of what I thought was kind of a good idea to do, to put people who know about the ag rejuvenation and the financial end of it. But I don't know, Del, you don't want to particularly do that, or what question with that?
Well, I mean, some of this, and an ordinance change certainly would, is it's gonna delay this.
Okay, we
They
don't
are
really,
under a timeline to get these online. If I believe it's by spring of next year,
Yeah.
if they are not producing power, they lose their credits.
so if we change the ordinance, we got to do notices and
It's at
all that
least,
kind of stuff.
probably
It's
at least 3 months to do that.
3.
Yes.
Okay. Is it a rider that we can add to a contract with the building permit?
No, that contract is not required by our ordinance, so that would be above and beyond our ordinance.
Can they agree to pay what we have in place at the time?
As I,
Sure. Go ahead, Mr. Kinzinger.
thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I read that decommissioning plan, that paragraph, it indicated that we have the right to obtain a bond. All I'm suggesting is this is the type of bond we're gonna obtain. We're gonna make the renewal on the backs of the one getting the bond. We're gonna have the bond at 125% of the difference between what the ag law requires and what they think is the improvement. And that bond also includes $1,000 a day penalty if it isn't renewed properly. And it's all on the one who holds the bond.
Pretty sure it would require an ordinance change to do
Well, it says
something
we
like
can have a
that.
bond. Go back to that
Yeah, but
paragraph.
Or cash, we could ask for cash.
Yeah, and that's the other option, so then they can decide what they
A
want to do.
bond or cash in the amount of what the decommissioning plan says, not plus
Yeah.
25%
Yeah, that'd
or
be
plus
right.
10%. It does not say that.
They would
Okay.
probably go with the bond.
Well, I would say we could probably go ahead and change it. We should roll with changing the ordinance with you agree on. You're the county board here, and then go ahead and let this one go under the old rule and have the ordinance change in place for the new,
Well,
anything that comes in after.
likely-
My question is, what is the bond? We don't say what the bond is.
Yeah,
We don't even say what
That's a
the
vague
bond
word.
has to include.
It's a vague
I mean,
word.
Anybody can say anything they want.
about a bond.
The bond
Yeah.
has to be an amount, in this case, $223,000.
Who's it payable to?
Kankakee County,
And how much is the bond? We're gonna determine the bond amount.
$223,000.
So if we wanna make it renewable on their option rather than our option, then that require an ordinance change.
And that has to be good for 3 years, where it'll be reevaluated, and then a new bond issued with adjusted numbers. Presumably, the cost of decommissioning
And I've already
goes up,
experienced,
and therefore, we
with
would
the
need a
county.
bond in a higher amount. But if it goes down, it would be a bond in a lower amount.
I've already experienced with the county where those bonds expire, and we didn't say, we said thank you and then renewed the bond, but somebody else might not.
No, I mean, there's a lot of things that can happen.
I know, and that's one of them. I was trying to tighten the hole a little bit.
Mr. Chairman, go ahead.
So is a 20-year bond? Is that the bond, when they bond this out, is it for a 20-year time period for the life of the, for the life of the?
Life of the equipment.
the equipment
The
there?
ordinance is not specified on that, but since it's reviewed and renewed every 3 years, I would imagine the bond would be good for 3 years.
3-year
And
bonds
then
that are
we get another bond for the next 3 years and another bond for the 3 years after that.
So we do have time to update the ordinance
We are
after.
readjusting this every, well, that's,
No, I mean for the next 3 years is what I'm saying.
I don't know if you can go back on that.
I don't know that you
No, I mean, you
can.
can't change it on these guys, but I mean, any
Anything goes.
concurring after that. I don't think you're gonna get all 8 of these in 1 year, which I
Yes,
could be
we-
wrong.
If they want their credits, we will. So we should
Okay.
be getting, in fact, in the next month or so, we should be getting all.
Do they have to start construction or be completed with construction?
They have to be producing power.
Producing power, okay. Thank you. Anyone else have anything? Ms. Peters?
There could be a possible hazardous material. Maybe they're not classified hazardous material at this point, but possibly in the future that could affect it, correct? And then, do you have any, what was the last time we decommissioned something and the county was responsible for taking it down? How did that work?
We've never decommissioned anything.
Okay.
Okay. Anyone else? That's it? Okay. So we're gonna go have a motion to, go ahead and approve this, Delbert, and make that this commissioning plan that you have in place go through? And do we have to vote on it, or is it already ready to go?
No, we would need a vote. We need to determine, are we gonna accept those recommendations that I gave you? And is it gonna be a bond or a cash or escrow account?
Okay. Obviously, everyone says it needs to be a bond. Or cash escrow, obviously, that's, yeah.
Either one's acceptable.
Okay, I don't wanna
I
hold
need
up,
to know what to tell these,
I don't wanna hold up any permits on these things, because we've, they've been going for, some of them close to a year now. Okay, Ms. Dunbar?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Do you need a motion to accept Albert's recommendations? Because I would make that motion.
Okay, thank you. Could you get a second, please? Okay, Ms. Peters? Let's see, that's gonna be, all in favor, say aye. Thank you.
can we,
Opposed, say nay. Thank you. Sure.
Can we start to take a look at the things that Mr. Kinzinger is saying, because I have a feeling we might get another round of these. And they'll start the process knowing what our decommissioning structure is at that point.
I would be glad to look at that.
That way they know it's
Is that
up front
acceptable?
when they start, and there's no surprises.
I am in no way a financial expert or
Well,
extremely knowledgeable about these bonds.
Mr. Kinzinger has been around for a long, long time.
His first bond was parchment,
With a feather.
papyrus.
Okay. Okay, we're gonna, sure.
The committee approved my recommendations if the ordinance does say that the county board must also approve the decommissioning plan. So if we could have a motion to approve these two.
Okay, I have
These
a
two.
motion.
Yeah.
Motion to approve these two. Okay, Mr. Washington? Let's see, number 15, Ms. Dunbar?
No.
Oh, no? You second, right? Okay,
I didn't have a question.
I thought, okay. All in favor, say aye. Opposed, same sign? None? Okay, thank you. Delberts, I asked, and a couple other people asked, about some questions about some things that we get talked about around here. I take for granted that everyone knows what we're talking about. I've been around it a long time, 15, 18 years, 23 years actually. And I've heard and been involved in all different kinds of different things, but a lot of people haven't. So I asked Delbert to give us a couple points each week to, things that we're going to be coming up and things that we're going to be talking about in the future here in the near future. So he's going to give us a quick commercial permit review process presentation here and property rights and zoning presentation.
Right. Last month,
Mr. Marion, do you want to come up here, sit up here somewhere? No? It's up to you.
I'll call on you if I need you.
Okay.
Last month, when I made the offer about topics that we could discuss, Mr. Wheeler, Chairman Wheeler, asked that he'd like to know more about how the commercial permitting process in respect to solar farms works. And I thought about it. I said, it's really the same thing as any commercial permit. So I tailored a presentation for you in regards to commercial permitting, or as we call them, non-residential permits. We try to stay away from calling it commercial permits because then we get people who have schools or churches saying it's not a commercial building. And they're right, it's not, but it still falls under that same category because it's non-residential. On the wall over here, I created this a while back in anticipation of trying to automate the process some, is the county's entire permitting process. It's a little impressive. Basically, and I'm going to get up for just a second.
There will be a quiz.
Yeah, there's quiz. When you come into the office and ask for a permit, you start here. These are all of the questions that our inspectors have to ask before they can issue a permit.
Could you grab the mic? Sure. No, turn that on for you so it goes out.
Sure. So, backing up, when you come into the department and ask for a permit, you start here. All of these are the questions that our inspectors have to ask for any given permit. The permit is actually issued here and finalized here after inspections and review. So the bulk of it is just in the application process. Not every permit has to follow every one of these boxes and check it. It depends on the type of permit. This purple area over here, that's cell towers. This green area over here, that's agricultural exempt permits. And if it's a commercial permit that requires liquor licenses or various other reviews by the health department, some of that's over in here. So not in floodplain, these are our floodplain questions down here. So depending on the property, the type of permit, depends on what questions have to be answered. But if all of them get to yes at the end, we issue the permit. If there's any no's, either we don't issue the permit or something has to be rectified before we can. Okay, so that's a little preliminary on actual commercial permits, or all permits. Coming back up here, the permitting process itself. And we are not going through that entire thing here, but begins with an application for the commercial permitting process. And part of that application, they have to submit structural drawings and calculations, civil drawings, plans, and calculations if they're going to be doing any earthwork, list of contractors, and depending on the type of permit, it could be other permits from external agencies that we also have to verify that they have, and other supporting documentations and plans depending on the type of permit. Those plans, we have nobody on staff that is qualified to review those plans. So structural review plans and all of those calculations and submittals go to a third-party reviewer for review. Currently, we use Kesslin Engineering. We certainly would use others, but we have not found one yet. That structural engineers are evidently fairly rare. But if we do find another firm that would like to be our reviewing agency, we certainly would entertain that. And of course, the applicant pays the cost of that review. Once that has all been reviewed and all the deficiencies have been addressed, then those plans are sent back to the planning department for our final approval. Likewise, the civil review side of things, if you are doing earthwork or impervious surface, all of those plans go out to a third-party reviewer for engineering review on those. That cost is also paid by the applicant. Currently, we rotate between MG2A, Piggish, and Robinson Engineering for this service. So we have 3 on that side that we rotate between. Obviously, they cannot review their own work, so sometimes that plays a factor into who gets which project. Once that has all been reviewed and all the deficiencies have been addressed, we get a report back that it's approved, and that goes into the file as well. We also do a zoning and planning review to make sure that the project meets our zoning ordinance and the plans of the county. And a submitted contractors list is reviewed to make sure all the contractors on the job site will be registered. Then we get to other permitting and review. They have to do a notice of intent. If they're doing any earthwork, it must be filed with the IEPA prior to the commencement of the project. They have to do a notice of termination once the project is complete, also filed with the IEPA, and we need to make, our staff needs to make sure that all of these documents we have a copy of all of them to make sure it's been done. The NPDES report, they have to do a National Pollution Discharge Elimination System permit, also issued by the IEPA. A lot of these do pertain to earthwork and stormwater issues. The SWPPP must be approved and implemented throughout the duration of the project, and that is your erosion control. In the case of solar farms, they must have an agricultural impact mitigation agreement in place. Also wind farms, if we happen to get another one of those. But that applies to both of those types of projects. And those are the only two projects that those apply to, so that's kind of a special one based on the type of project. Additional steps and reviews. Depending on the project, if it needs a new entrance, an entrance permit needs to be issued. We do not issue that, but we have referral forms that sends them to the proper road use authority to obtain that permit. They need to bring a copy of that permit back to us before we can approve the project. If it needs an address, they get sent to E911 for issuance of an address. And depending on the specifics of the project, there could be other things. Solar farms have a few extra. As a drain tile map, they must provide us with a subsurface drain tile map that's created, and then we send that out to our third-party civil engineer as part of the civil review process. But we also send a copy of that to any affected drainage districts in the area. And that, of course, any deficiencies or issues are resolved during the civil review process. If there is a problem with the drainage district, they would contact, if they have any problems with it or any issues, they would contact us and we would get those resolved before we issue a permit. Solar farms require a road use agreement with the road use authority prior to the issuance of a permit when it comes to a solar farm. And they must have, as we just did earlier, a decommissioning plan in place before we can issue a permit. Those are additional steps for solar farms. Final. Once these reviews have all been approved and all the requirements have been satisfied, a building permit will be issued. The fee will be calculated and we'll receive the funds for the project. Then we enter into the inspection process until final completion. And upon final completion, either a certificate of occupancy or a certificate of compliance will be issued depending on the type of project. You can't occupy something that's not a building, so it would be a certificate of compliance if it's not a structure-related project.
Okay, thanks, Del. Does anyone have any questions about any of that we heard there? Sure.
Not necessarily a question, Mr. Chairman, sorry.
Oh, Mr. Wheeler, sorry.
As we put these together, can you start, just in your own office, a binder to start with on these presentations? And then, because every couple of years committees change around, new people come on the board, new people join this committee. It'd be nice if we could give people that and maybe even put it all online under some level. So just start assembling that as we go and we start doing these things.
Yeah.
It just makes sense that it'd be nice to take that back and review it from time to time.
Yes,
Yeah.
not a problem. I actually keep all of them because I do recycle them. You know, next time a new PZA is seated, I got to start all over again. So why reinvent the wheel?
Right, just hand it to them, or here it is online, here's the link.
Update
Go
it.
find.
Yes. So,
Okay.
Okay. Okay, the next one is very dear to the zoning issue here, as we have property rights and zoning. Delbert?
last month, Mr. Kinzinger said he would like to hear more about how property rights and zoning affect each other. So I am no expert on property rights by any means, but I will try to relay what I do know to you. So, ownership of property comes with various rights, and they can be numerous and they change over time. And it's sometimes a moving target. Depends on where you live as to what rights you may have, depends on the state. So it is a moving target. But most people who explain property rights explain them as a bundle of sticks. When you own property, you have a bundle of rights, like a bundle of sticks, and those sticks can be traded, can be transferred, or you can transfer or trade the entire bundle, such as outright selling the property. But you don't have to sell the property to transfer a right. You can transfer rights, just partial rights. That's an easement is a transfer of rights. You're transferring part of your right to occupy that property or to use that property. Some of the rights in your bundle: the right to possess the property, the right to mortgage-wise or otherwise encumber the property financially, the right to lease the property, the right to sell it, the right to subdivide it, and the right to encumber the land, such as create a covenant or a restriction on the land. So those are some of your rights. You, as I said, you can transfer any or all of these rights when you own property. But there are other bundles. Even though you own the property, there are other entities out there that also have a bundle of rights on your property. And they include the public, the government, and third parties. And we'll explain some of those. The public. Some of the entities that may have interest in your property, and that's usually by state statute or law: railroads, public works facilities, utility transmission lines, air rights, riparian or water rights, mineral rights, and sometimes grazing rights. You don't see that too much around here, but quite often out west. The government has rights, your right to own property is granted by the government, and they've determined they want to keep a few of those rights for themselves, such as the right to collect taxes, the right to enforce a lien, the right to protect endangered species or wetlands, the right of zoning, the right to develop, the right to condemn your property, and the right to prohibit nuisances. All of that is spelled out in state and federal law as well. And some third parties can actually have rights over your property. Right of possession. If you have a homeowners association that your property resides in, you have given some of your property rights to that homeowners association. Historic preservation entities. Conservation entities. If you have a conservation easement on your property that you've established, you give some of your rights to that conservation entity, or given up some of your rights to them, such as, I will not build on this and I will conserve it. Your right to build has been given away. Easements is definitely a third party right to your property. You've given one of those rights to someone else. And adverse possession, and that's an entirely different section of the law, but if you have property that is in an adverse possession situation, you have given up some of your property rights. So how does this work with zoning? As I said earlier, controlling the use of your property, zoning, is a right the government has kept for itself over your property. And the purpose of that, as spelled out in every zoning ordinance and state statute pertaining to zoning, is to protect the public health, safety, comfort, morals, and general welfare. That is why we zone. And property rights are at the core of zoning. It balances the rights of property owners with the rights of others within those bundles that I spoke of, as well as the rights and bundle holders within adjoining properties and nearby property owners. And one of the goals of zoning is to reduce conflicts between property owners by placing compatible uses together and separating incompatible uses. That's the first step with zoning, is to put compatible uses in the same district. Time has proven that a religious facility or a school is compatible with residential uses, so they are allowed in the residential district. A factory may not be compatible with that, so they're put in the industrial district. And that's the first step, is separating uses by compatibility, which the county has done. And zoning also sets standards that have to be followed by everyone. So therefore, everyone has an even playing field and everyone has to play by the same rules. That provides predictability. Your zoning code, your subdivision code, your building code, it all limits the rights you have on your property by restricting how you use the property. And it limits, how it can be used, what you can build, where you can build, how you can build. And although it does limit your property rights, it can also be beneficial by protecting your property rights because it also controls how your neighbor can use their property, how your neighbor can build on their property, and where your neighbor can build on your property. So think of zoning as a protection of property rights. And I think I already discussed this a little bit, but it groups uses into compatible districts, therefore reducing conflicts. Conflicts can still happen, but it greatly reduces the amount of conflicts between property owners and different uses. And it also provides a public forum so that if there is a zoning change, if your neighbor's trying to zone their property to something different, you get a voice. There's a public hearing, there's a whole process to go through. You may not win, and they may still be able to do what they were asking to do, but at least you were able to speak your mind, and it didn't just happen in a vacuum. So it does create a public forum for you to discuss how neighboring properties or your property is going to be used. And it treats everyone equal and fair and in an impartial manner by providing that set of standards for everyone to adhere to. And it provides predictability. You can be fairly confident in buying property if you do your due diligence and researches the zoning of it, that you're not going to end up with a incompatible use next door. I mean, yes, sometimes it does happen, but it does provide a level of predictability that you're not guessing. Well, if I invest in this property and build a nice house here, what am I going to have next door? If you look at the zoning and it's zoned residential, you can be fairly confident there's going to be another residence next door. So.
Okay. Any more, Robert?
Oh no, we're still going. I only got a couple more though.
Okay.
Two more slides. So here's a little bit of an example. Both A and B own their properties and have equal rights to use and enjoy those properties. Neither one of them has the right, however, to impede or adversely affect the other property owner's rights. And zoning is to help keep that from happening, to try to balance property A's rights with properties B's rights so they can both use and enjoy their property to the best and possible manner without harming each other. And that's really what it boils down to. It's obviously a lot more complicated than that when you put it into practice, but that is the basis. So, and basically the conclusion is what I just said. Both property owners should have the right to use their property to the highest and best use, providing they're not affecting each other or the environment or the public roads or something of that matter. And that's it.
Could you put it back up there so Jack can take a picture?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I can email you the whole thing if you'd like.
Oh, there you go. Okay. Okay, any questions about that? Property rights, very important part of zoning. A lot of people don't know what rights they really have, so.
So as part of the zoning process, this committee needs to evaluate both parties or all parties' property rights and strike a balance between them. That's part of the process.
Okay. Anyone else have anything to say about that? Okay. Yes, Mr. Kinzinger.
Just a quick comment. That was well done. Appreciate it. Excellent.
Thanks. Mr. Whitlock.
Del, is the way you explain the property owner's rights and then, on both sides of an issue have rights, is that why this committee is a quasi-judicial committee that only considers evidence put before them and not hearsay and public comments and side conversations? Is that the root of why it's a different role to be on this committee in those situations?
Yeah, it goes back to the fairness. It's not fair if you're making your decision on information that the rest of the group does not have to make the same decision. Zoning is based on facts. What are the facts of the case? This guy, parcel A should be able to do whatever it wants unless it can be proven that they can't. Emotions are not fact, Grandmother's crying in the background is not a fact. Well, it's a fact she's crying, but it doesn't really pertain to the case. However, 50 trucks a day, might pertain to the case.
Yes.
Okay, and if you know about those 50 trucks, but Ron doesn't know about those 50 trucks, then you're making a decision that might be different than his, because he is not party to that information. So that's part of the reason, yes.
Okay. Mr. Wheeler, all set? Oh, Mr. Washington.
Several years ago, it was brought to this committee's attention, there was two families, their properties were side by side. The one family claimed that the other family had obstructed the sunlight from coming into their house. The object was a tennis court with canvas on the fencing. So we, as a small committee of planning and zoning, went over and viewed both properties and found that there was no justification for what they had said. The real reason was something I want to discuss, but they were trying to intimidate the other family to make them take the tennis court down.
That's usually why those things happen.
That actually goes back to am I still on?
Yes, you are.
That actually goes back to one of our standards. One of the standards that must be met in our ordinance is that you cannot impede the supply of light or air to a neighboring property.
Okay, does anyone else have anything to say about our meeting? We don't have any old business, new business we had, so a motion to adjourn.
We got new business. New
Whoops.
business.
Oh, sorry, checked the wrong box. Okay, under new business, we have some openings here. We have an opening on the historic preservation, that's a committee, right? Commission?
Commission.
What are the qualifications for that, Mr. Wheeler?
We filled the architect, so this is just a at-large person, interested in historic preservation.
Okay,
They were just sending the application.
okay. Next up, we have 4 opening on the Kankakee County Regional Planning Commission. Is that, Delbert, is that any specific
We do.
qualifications for that?
No, just somebody willing to serve. We do try to make it geographically dispersed, and we like to have different membership from various levels of expertise, such as a lawyer, farmer, banker. Just to keep various, and like to have it spread out. And so far we do. We do have one applicant for one of those openings
Okay,
currently. So I think that'll be on the executive committee.
can it be a
next
board,
executive committee.
can it be a board member? No. it can't be a
We
board-
have, actually,
Just
we're
two?
allowed to have 2. We currently have 3.
Three.
So
Okay.
that's another discussion, but, all right. Do we
Okay.
need something official for that, or?
I think you just got it.
Okay,
Yeah.
but enough of that.
That's resignation.
We currently have 2 board members, so we're good.
We gone.
Okay.
We
Excellent.
gone. Okay.
All right.
Next one up is we have an opening on the Zoning Board of Appeals. Pretty interesting job to have for somebody that's interested in government.
Right,
It's
and this is-
really variable. All kinds of things happen in that position.
This is not an opening because somebody left. It's just, we do have to advertise anytime somebody's
Term is up.
in
Yeah.
case somebody else would like to apply. But
Okay.
this is for Mr. Sawyer, and he has every intention of applying again, so.
Okay. Thank you.
I have one more on that. It's not on the agenda, but the GIS committee does have an opening for a county board member, if anyone's interested. I think
Is that like a high-tech position?
Ms. Peters, high-tech?
You got to be
It's a
like
high-tech.
needle brain.
It can be a high-tech discussion.
Somebody
but
with flying experience.
We
Oh,
don't
yeah.
actually do any flying.
We could
because
buy a plane for 60
We don't
grand.
own a plane. We could use a plane if you want to.
Phone out the window.
Or a boat too. But no, any board member could serve. They do sometimes get technical. If you like talking about servers and cartography and computers and aerial photography, computer programs, then it's a committee for you.
Okay. Thank you. Motion to adjourn now?
Before we get to
Oh,
that,
boy.
I can.
Come on. Keep shooting me down, Del.
I have one thing to
Okay,
to ask.
go ahead.
It's just,
Talking for an hour.
this month it was commercial permitting and property rights and zoning. Is there a topic for next month that you'd like to? Keeping in mind that if we do have a big agenda, it might get postponed till the following month, but.
We won't put anything on unless we have space.
Maybe the process on getting final engineering approval for the solar farms, what they have to go for and the drainage and all of that stuff. Maybe good for the committee to know. What do you think? Because it'll be coming around again.
Well, I think I explained what's required. Do you want the actual process that the engineers go through for review? Because I'd have to probably bring them in for that. I mean, we send them all the plans and specifications. They review them. If they find deficiencies, they talk to the other engineers who drew it, and they go back and forth
Yeah.
until they come to an agreement of what's right. Then we see it again once it's got a approved stamp on it.
Where's the drainage district aspect?
We send them a copy of the plan, and they get to review it. It's up to them to contact us if they have any issues.
Only if they have an issue, or they have to write your report?
They do not have to write a report.
Okay.
In fact, the ordinance simply says we must provide them with the map.
Okay.
So maybe
Okay.
we don't need to talk about it now next month.
Well,
But that was
maybe.
part of the questions I had.
Yeah.
We just
So,
did it, so.
Yeah, I'm just not sure what I'd present on it.
Some of my stuff was about farms and, drain tiles and who put them in, and WPA put them in, and who put them in. The guy could have put them in, didn't put them on a map. So we get these solar farms going. Do they have a way to survey for all that stuff in the ground when they do that? That's the kind of things we need to know
Yes,
about.
they do. And
Okay.
we actually have them for these two decommissioning. Well, one of them
Okay.
anyway. We're waiting on the other one.
Because that's something that's going to be coming up, and like to cover things you're going to be talking
Exactly how they do it, I do not know, but I do have a map for one of them that shows all of the, not only the main trunk lines, but all of the feeder lines as well.
Okay.
So
about. Good.
our engineers will compare that to the solar farm plan and make sure that, they're not putting any pylons through any of those pipes or.
Yeah, we'll find that out in a hurry. Okay. I want to thank you for your presentation, for your thing on the wall there. That's going to stay there for a while, right? So we can look at it?
No, that'll probably go back to my office because it's barely hanging up there as it is.
Okay. Motion to adjourn. Okay, Ms. Peters, Ms. Dunbar. Yes, sir.
I've tried to ask my question 3 times.
Yes.
I haven't seen you ask.
That's what this is.
I'll tell you, I didn't purposely not call your name.
Down here.
Okay,
Now, my question
you're
is,
done.
and this may be for Mr. Chairman too, our previous discussion about having the permitting process be notified to the road commissioners and to the highway department at the issuance of these permits to mitigate a problem that we just recently had out in Salina Township, where all the mud and everything was tracked out on the road and creating a traffic hazard. The road commissioner didn't know anything about it until 2 days after. And by that time, many cars have already ran over 18-inch clumps of sod. Dell, based on the previous discussion, is that something you're going to take forward and try to implement a notification?
I will look into seeing how we could do that, if we could do that, and just what kind of a task that's going to be.
Okay, I would like it put on future things, agendas, to follow up with it.
Because when the staff reports go out and they're mailed out to just about everybody that has anything to do with anything around. So when they originally happened, when they come into the zoning, we have many cases, we never saw any highway department guys, but we did see a lot of highway department guys too.
No, this had nothing to do with zoning,
Okay,
so there was no staff report.
okay.
It was a wind survey tower that was put up out there. They
Okay.
went into a muddy field and basically endangered the public.
Yeah,
So I want to see it followed up on.
okay. That's something they could have called in here for about.
And
They did call in here and were told that basically it's none of your business. We don't have to tell you.
that's not true.
No, that's the
Okay.
answer I got from Mr. Van Gilder. In fact, I believe he mentioned you by name.
Yeah, I did talk to him, yes.
Okay.
Okay. Sorry, I didn't see your hand. I really didn't see it.
I'll get my points across.
I had
believe me.
my eyes fixed and everything, so good to go. Okay, now, We have a motion and a second to adjourn. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Thank you, please.